Back to another episode of Detonation. Here today we have a huge religion debate. I mean, look at all the people here. We've got Ben Zine, we've got Blaine Ulster, we've got Lincoln Cannon, we've got John from Art Sundays. Everybody knows John. Micah Redding, and that's it, I think, for the room. So I'm going to go quickly around the room and and ask everybody to just quickly explain their position, because this is a religious debate. Ben Zine, open up the floor. What's your religious sort of leanings?
Yes. Well, I am here also as a candidate for the Transhumanist Party representing the Futurist New Deal. And in the spirit of religious syncretism, I would like to speak on behalf of universalism. And in my adult life, I've also attended a service as a Unitarian Universalist. I was a member of First Unitarian in Los Angeles and a regular attendee at All Souls Church in New York, a lovely Unitarian Universalist congregations there. And one thing that is of interest, I think, to syncretists is that this term, Unitarian Universalist, describes a merger of two organizations from a little bit different traditions, one more in the Christian tradition, one more in the Judaic tradition. And they came together when they realized that they had this shared interest in universalism, this shared interest in the broadest understanding of faith, and this idea that we want to embrace one another and not be a doctrinaire in our dealings with other communities. And that notion was the spirit of which this transhumanist syncretism panel was created, and I'm very much looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you very much, Ben. So I'm just going to go down the list here. Blair, you're next on the list. Blair, please tell us a little bit of a summary of your religious leanings.
Yeah, I am a Mormon. I'm a 9th generation Mormon, the kind of Mormon that it's in your DNA Mormon. I identify as a Mormon transhumanist. That is my religion. I serve on the Mormon Transhumanist Association Board, and I also serve on the Christian Transhumanist Association Board. I also do a lot of work in the LGBTQ community, and a lot of my work there is translating transhumanist ideas of morphological freedom into debates about contemporary issues and reconciling those issues for LGBT people.
Lincoln Cannon, you're next on the list. Welcome to the debate. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Steele. I'm a Mormon. Like Blair, my family's been Mormon for a very long time. I'm also a Mormon transhumanist and am one of the founders of both the Mormon Transhumanist Association and the Christian Transhumanist Association. Currently serve on the boards of both of those organizations. I have a strong ecumenical religious streak. I have many friends who are Buddhist, many friends who are Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and I love what those other religions have taught me over many years and value the ways that they've shaped my spirituality and helped me be a better Mormon in many cases. So I've been looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Hey, John, so you're next on the list, and you're not a Mormon, so what are you?
Hello, everyone. How are you? Thank you for having me. My name's John, and I come from both multicultural and multi-religious background because both of my parents have different religions. They're Christian and they're Buddhist. And for me, I just participate in both of their religion, and I go to churches, I go to temples, and yeah.
Fantastic. And Micah, you're the last on the list, last but not least. And what are you, Micah? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. I am one of the founders and the executive director of the Transhumanist Association. I grew up Christian as a preacher's kid in a faith group called Churches of Christ, and this is a kind of, most people would identify it as an ultra conservative fundamentalist Christian group, but its origin was in an attempt to unify all of Christendom and ultimately all the world. And so I kind of buy into that tradition that I come from. And so I'm a Christian, and that's kind of my lean.
Yeah, and that's really good. And we all acknowledge that Mike has got a little bit of an internet issue there, but I'm sure you can hear the gist of what he's saying. So thank you very much. So to set the sort of the ground rules, you know, don't like if somebody offends you that they're not meaning to. We're just trying to have a talk here. You know, like I'm going to do a little bit of a time limit, so it's like, you know, just so we can get through as much as possible. And yeah, and just be polite to everyone, and that's really about it. So to my first sort of question is, there's different types of religions and there's different type of origins which lead to different stories. Like, what is the meaning of life would be my first question to all these people. So, Micah, I'll start with you and I'll go back around the other way. What is the meaning of life? That seems to be something that religion has a huge focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's to cultivate and create life. So when we talk about meaning, we're talking about what part we play in the larger schemes. And so humans, I think, are uniquely suited to help the ecosystem at large flourish and then ultimately spread out into the cosmos. That's kind of what we're here to do as I see it. I draw that from the biblical vision, what I see at the end of Revelation, and some scriptures that I think are really key.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much. John, you go next. What is the meaning of life?
So, meaning of life. Well, being a Buddhist, we also believe in like reincarnations and all, and then also meaning of life. Throughout our life, we have to be good to other people, respect others, and we also have a goal of achieving a higher ascension, like to meditate, and we just trying to go through life by helping each other and helping hand, basically. Yeah.
All right, cool. So, Lincoln Cannon, what's the meaning of life?
Happiness or joy, and there's many ways to get there. My Christian and Buddhist friends have suggested some of those ways, and I think that there are also others, and I think it's a wonderful thing that it's different for different people.
All right, Blair, what's the meaning of life?
Similar, the meaning of life is to find joy, but also in Mormonism, the meaning of life is to become a god.
All right, so Ben Zion, what's the meaning of life?
Well, there's a gentleman from the Hanson Robotics organization who tours around. We all know Sophia the robot. We all know Ben Goertzel. We're kind of at least familiar with him, or some people at this panel do know him. And when he asked Sophia this question, what's the meaning of life? She said that the meaning of life is to continue living. And I think that is a big, the biggest idea for me in religious syncretism and in transhumanist policymaking and organizing, is to allow for a world that can have a positive longevity outcomes, and allow for us to, as Lincoln said, not just to live long, but to be well and be happy. These things go hand in hand.
All right, so that's really interesting. So everybody here would have some sort of founding scripture. Going back around the other way, Ben Zion, what would be your founding scripture? Is it Ray Kurzweil's books? What's your founding scripture? Is it the scientific method?
That is a big part of this. I do consider Ray Kurzweil and so even some earlier writers to be people that have had a quasi-religious impact on my life, and I think on a lot of transhumanist lives. And I think that it's still an open question. What is the organizing principle for emerging culture and religious syncretism in the 21st century? There are still some unanswered questions there. I think that we don't live in a world where someone is going to we've seen I think maybe we've seen the meme where there's a prayer candle with Ray Kurzweil on it. But I don't know too many people who are going to quite take it in that direction. But I do draw great a great inspiration from individuals like this, and from individuals even at this panel here today. I think that my religion is humanity, and the elevation of all of us. And I hope that I have faith enough to make some small contribution or gesture to promoting it.
Blair, your founding scriptures, why are they important?
Yeah, in Mormonism, we have what's called the standard works, and there are four scriptures. It's the Bible, the Book of Mormon. We also have what's called the Pearl of Great Price and the Doctrine and Covenants. And these are the standard scriptures of Mormonism. Mormonism also has this interesting idea about collecting truth and gathering truth. And wherever it comes from, we gather up truth and we call it Mormonism. So as far as what constitutes a scripture, scripture is wherever we find truth, and whatever means we find that by, that's part of scripture. Why is it important? Well, I personally subscribe to the example of Jesus Christ and the greatest commandment being to love one another. So for me, my biggest doctrine, my biggest scripture, my religion is love. And then we go from there to find truth.
Lincoln Cannon, your founding scriptures.
Sure. Just to build on what Blair already mentioned, in Mormonism, the scriptural canon is not closed. We teach that we always need more and better scripture, that we always need more and better prophets, and that God is always working with humanity. One of the best ways, in my opinion, to get revelation and inspiration today is to look into nature. If we think that God created the world that we live in, then surely we can learn something about God and learn something about our potential and our relationship with God by doing science and by engaging with that kind of process. So I would say that even the rocks, the mountains, the hills, the forests, they're scripture, something that we can get revelation out of.
Fantastic. John, your founding scriptures.
Well, as a will be since we're little, we're being taught through like every single like schools and stuff. We're being taught by the ways of the Buddhists, and we have this respect five things. We got the Buddha, the script, and we got the monks, and the what come after is you got your parents and you got your teachers. If we follow by that rule, like we have to respect those five things, and then another thing is we have to, one goal is to, as I said before, to achieve ascension by through meditating and stuff. So if we follow by that rule, and then we just we just, like I said, just go through life by that.
Micah Redding, your founding scriptures.
Yeah, for me, a huge central text, Genesis 1, which is the first page of the both Hebrew and the Christian Bibles, and what tells us is that God creates life, and then created humanity and called us to do the same thing. And so that mission, which is that we are supposed to cultivate the life of the world, is really core to how I understand the universe, our place in it, who we are. And actually, the way I see the scientific method or something very like it, that it calls us to use science, that it calls us to understand the natural order, and to use that to help it flourish. And to Blair's point about Mormon scripture calling you to become a god, I'd say that in Genesis 1, what it shows us is that God is defined by the creation and cultivation of life, right? Is the core characteristic of any kind of God, the ability to create life. So it's kind of our core ability that we should pursue as well.
All right, very cool. So what I want to know, Micah, you can go back on this one. So how do you know that your religion is true and that the other thoughts, conception, and ideas and other religions are not true?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the fact that my religion is true doesn't necessarily mean that other religions not true, right? That would have to be decided on a case-to-case basis based on what they were specifically claiming. Now, I said this way. My religion is the flourishing of life, and so my claim that my religion is true is based on the fact that my religion the flourishing of life, and my Christianity calls me to do that and calls me to equip other people, other humans, and the rest of the ecosystem to do that. I define truth, life. Anything of life is truth.
Very interesting. So, John, why do you know that your religion is true and others are not true?
Well, as I said in the very start, it's like both my mom's Buddhist and my dad's Christian, so I've been taught in both principles of. So I've been taught in both ways. So I have this like, for me, I'll just learn. I just learn the basic rule of the religion, and then I follow the like pre-built road, should I say? And then we are also not being taught, it's like, say like, oh, just because you're learning this, that doesn't mean that other religions are not true and stuff. It's like we have this like very like perceptive of other people's religions, trying to like learn and trying to like, you know, being like interesting, like just ask questions, and yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you, John. Lincoln Cannon, how come your religion is true and others are not true?
Yeah. Well, I consider my religion true in the aspirational sense. Blair alluded to this earlier. Our founding prophet, Joseph Smith, once described Mormonism as accepting truth, let it come from whence it may, and that if we don't embrace all the truth from whatever source, we will not come out true Mormons, he said. So if we're going to be a true religion, we've got a lot to learn from other people in other places, other times, other things, the future as well. So is my religion true? Well, it's getting truer every day.
All right, Blair, why is your religion true and others not true?
I would challenge the fundamental premise of the question and maybe not say that my religion is true and others aren't true. I think there's truth to be found in any religion. I'm pretty universal in that regard. Again, it's a very Mormon idea. Find truth wherever it is, gather it up, and call it Mormonism. So in a weird way, Mormonism defines itself by truth. So it's true by virtue of definition of the word, which is kind of a tautology. But as Lincoln mentioned, truth is something that you make true. It's not something necessarily that's true right now. Truth is something we only see in retrospect. So is my religion true? I don't know, but let's make it true.
All right, so thank you very much for that. Ben Zion, why is your religion or your spiritism or your idea true and others not true?
I think I probably have a little bit a similar answer to Blair's, which is that I don't think that any faith or worldview is untrue. I don't think that any faith or worldview is incompatible with life extension or techno-optimist ideas. I think that there are some iterations of that which sometimes tend to force people to accept a factionalization, and those agents who are agents of that factionalization, I regard them to be the closest things to a heretic in this kind of conversation. But those of us who have a healthy relationship with something like ecumenical outreach and universalism, and not putting ourselves at odds with one another, which is really most people of faith. And I think that those are the true-hearted ones in my view.
All right, Ben. So does anyone have anything to say on any of those points before we go on to some more questions? Did anyone want to speak anything? All right, so that's good. So I was going to say. So the next question is, what is religion? Is religion in general a positive force? Ben, go ahead. Is it a positive force on the world? Is it positive or negative?
It's always a difficult question to answer. What sort of things might be having a good effect on us or not? If you even go back a few centuries, the world was a rather different place. There was, the idea of universal literacy, the ideas of an affluent society. These are 20th century conventions, effectively, and so to try to apply our standards and morality to earlier times, it's very difficult. But I do feel that in the 21st century, a belief and spiritual values are very much in keeping with techno progress and with overall humanist goals.
Blair, is religion being a positive influence and force on humanity, or a mixed or negative?
I would definitely say it's mixed. It's definitely done both positive and horrible things. I would definitely say that religion is a powerful thing and religion is a useful thing. And because it is useful and powerful, I don't think it's going to go away. It's going to be here to stay. So the question is, what do we do with those powerful tools we have? Religion has the ability to mobilize large groups of people in cohesive ways to accomplish great tasks, whether they are positive or negative. Well, that's up to us. If we want our religions to be more positive, we have to take control of that and make our religions more positive.
Lincoln Cannon, same question. Is it a positive force on humanity, negative or mixed?
Same answer. Religion is the most powerful social technology that we have. It's applied aesthetics, and you can apply it as a community towards wonderful ends or horrible ends. We've done both historically, profoundly, in both directions, and we need to learn how to use this technology better, more wisely, more compassionately, or it will destroy us.
John, same question.
Well, I'm gonna agree with Blair because it's like, as I said on the previous video about arts and religions and stuff, because a religion is really, really powerful tool depending on who's using it. Because it's like, like I said a couple of centuries ago, people are like very divided, they're spread out, and then the religions can unite people under, like, it's like sort of like putting people in a hive mind thinking, you know what I mean? It's like you tell them like this is the rule and stuff, and then because of that type of power, if someone uses in the wrong way and fell into the wrong hand, it can be really, really devastating. As well as it can be, religions can be as well as like a positive force, and or as well as a negative. So I'm going to go, it's like a mix, and it just depends on someone who uses it, and depends on like what type of people, like the way they interpret the text, should I say. Yeah.
All right, Micah Redding, positive, mixed or negative force?
Definitely been both positive and negative. Huge movements for good and huge movements for evil are both in religion. I'll just add that I think we would be this kind of creatures we are without religion. Religion is what allows us to cooperate at scale. And so we are an agricultural species. We are a species that has built societies and technologies and so forth that we could never do if we didn't come up with or discover religion somewhere along the way. So I think we're stuck with it. If we want to survive this century and keep growing and thriving, we're going to need to make the best use of religion we can.
All right, that's cool. So what I want to know is, the next question is, how do some of you agree and some of you don't agree with transhumanism? How do you guys integrate transhumanism into your theology? Why is that even a thing? How come we're talking about that? Mike, can take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see Christianity as a kind of transhumanism. Of course, Christianity started 1,000 years ago, roughly, and we didn't have the kinds of modern technology that we have now. We didn't have the kinds of potential ways of looking at science that we do now. But what it called the original people to was to operate on a global scale like had never happened before, and gave them a vision of what it meant to be human, which was that it was the perpetual creation and creation of life and the transformation into greater and greater ability to do so. So I see Christianity as a transhumanism, and I think it calls us in as part of our work to cultivate the world, to develop science, technology, and to use that to transform ourselves.
John, is transhumanism part of your religion? And if so, is it a positive? Has it got anything to do with you guys? I'm not sure.
Well, as I said, because like we by day we've been doing positive things and we're trying to achieve an ascension to the higher plane. Maybe as I said, like we achieved singularity in 2045. Maybe that's what we're looking for. Maybe we're trying to achieve the singularity, trying to get to the higher plane through, yeah,
So get to the higher plane through technology.
yep. We can it can be seen like that as well. Yes.
Lincoln Cannon, why is transhumanism a subject in your religion or what you're talking about?
As Micah points out, Christianity is a transhumanism, first of all. And then I'd say that Mormonism emphasizes the transhumanism of Christianity. In our scriptures, we read that the glory of God is intelligence. We're taught in our scriptures that that humanity should become God and that God was once human, and that this is a trajectory that's been followed before and should be followed again, this transformative process of humanity becoming like God in glory, in power, in compassion, and intelligence. And so if I'm going to be a Mormon, if I'm going to actually trust in what my religious tradition teaches, then I cannot help but be a transhumanist. Mormonism mandates transhumanism.
All right, that's very interesting. Blair, why is transhumanism something you're talking about?
Yeah, I would definitely continue off Lincoln's comments and say that Mormonism specifically puts a very heavy emphasis on theosis and divinization and the idea of becoming gods in ways that I've never come across another Christian sect that has put such an emphasis on this in the way that Mormonism has. And so when you think about the ultimate goals of Mormonism being almost completely parallel with ideas of transhumanism, you get this really weird mix of Mormons who, again, Mormons are very much a people of doing. And so if we're going to become these things, if we're going to become gods, if we're going to do anything, it's going to be because we rolled up our sleeves and actually got to work. So Mormonism is the theology and transhumanism is the doing of that theology.
Ben Zion, why is transhumanism important to your beliefs?
Yes. There's sometimes conversation about from other secular humanists or from people who are not well versed in techno optimism. This glib sort of comment that transhumanism overall seems like a religion, and I think we would we might also mention that there are some organizations like the Church of Perpetual Life, like my Radfest affiliated friends here in Arizona, People Unlimited, like a Terrasem. They're doing wonderful organizing around technospirituality, pardon me, and really bringing these communities together. My feeling is that there's no discussion of techno-spirituality and of transhumanism without talking about life extension concepts. And to me, that is the thing that most moves me in terms of belief and in terms of a call to action, which is to for all of us to work to create a world that can sustain a longer lifespans and healthier lifestyles.
All right, so John said something interesting. He said it's based on the interpretation of, like, what you believe is based on interpretation as well of your scriptures, right? And so, Ben, I'm going to start with you. Yours is probably the newest idea on the marketplace, but Mormonism is a very new religion to the world. It's only been around for 200 something years. It's very new. John, you're probably you're representing the oldest religion. So Ben, with transhumanism, interpretation of your scriptures, of your it's not scriptures, but of your belief, is it open to interpretation that you might be offending a deity? There
is always these concerns. My tendency is to concern myself with the communities who might take umbrage to some statement, and leave leave some of these other matters to other minds. But there are those concerns that people are troubled by religious syncretism. There is a resistance to religious syncretism by people who I would otherwise regard to be quite broad-minded individuals. I think they have an idea that a sort of a grandfathering idea, wherein religious traditions that have been relatively static or have some kind of a longer timeline, that they are somehow more respectable than people who are trying to bring new ideas to the conversation. And I don't quite understand that. It seems like a tremendously socially conservative idea that's quite commonplace. I hope that people can see that we need to try to evolve in this. You know, I recently shot a mini documentary, which is also the same form as a television pilot for a reality show. And that mini documentary is a meditation on mind uploading, and also it involves my own experience with getting someone to create a deep fake virtual reality experience for me, so that I can get closure with the loss of a loved one. And it's you know, I spoke to some people on this panel about this project, and even got comments from them on this matter relating to techno-spiritualism. But that resistance is also seen in talking about these things.
That's time. Thanks, Ben. So Blair, do you ever worry that because these other religions, these other faiths are massive? I mean, you're talking like Islam has, I don't know, billions of people in it. Hindus have 1 billion people in it. So are you ever worried that like your scriptures are open to interpretation and you might be offending a deity by going down this transhumanist road?
No, I don't worry about offending a deity by going down the transhumanist road. If there were any type of benevolent deity that had any concern over me, I would think of that as some sort of benevolence as compared to a parent. And so I wouldn't be upset with my child with playing with blocks and trying to build Lego things and all sorts of things. I would be disappointed with my children if they were hurting their brother or sister along the way. The Legos aren't the problem. It's how we're treating each other when we play Legos.
All right, Lincoln Cannon, same question.
Sure. If God exists, as I trust is the case, I think there's a couple of ways that we could offend God. The first way is if we don't try. In the Christian tradition and the Mormon tradition, we emphasize the idea that God is to us like a parent, a father. In Mormonism, we talk about Heavenly Mother as well. And if children don't attempt to grow up into adults, most parents become deeply concerned about those children. So not trying would be one way to offend, perhaps. A second way that perhaps we could offend God is trying in the wrong way. In the New Testament, Paul the Apostle describes two kinds of would-be gods. On the one hand, you've got what he calls the son of perdition, who attempts to raise himself above all else that's called God, declaring itself God. And then on the other hand, Paul describes another God who would raise us all as joint heirs in the glory of God, and that's Christ. So how we try to become like God, how we try to become like our parents matters a whole lot. And so if we are trying and we're doing it in a compassionate way, then I think we're not offending God.
All right, so John, are you afraid that you might upset a deity going down this road because of misinterpretation?
Going down, as I said, we have one of the many things that taught during the Buddhism is like you respect the Buddha, the script, the monks, the parents and the teachers. Like if some people, if you see someone disrespecting that, I'd say you'll be offending what the Buddha taught you and the script taught you. But going down the transhumanism and like trying to achieve ascension, or like trying to achieve a higher plane, maybe it's like you're doing trying to find your inner self, as you say, like your true self. Maybe by going down that road, I'll probably say, in my opinion, using the text and what you taught, and I say it probably not offending the deity. I say, because it will only come to a problem where you disrespect the guidelines of the what you're being taught. So
Okay, Michael Redding, hit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just kind of ping off of that, are we potentially upsetting God? And I would say we're probably upsetting some God. Right? So, Paul in the New Testament says there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is one God and one Lord, and it's the one that is present in Christ, and that's the one that calls us to greater light, to greater flourishing, and to greater transformation. So if we follow that God and that Lord, then we have to follow the path, which is this unlimited, open-ended process of transformation to greater and more glorious life. And as some of these other folks said, if we don't do that, that's where we're risking the divine wrath.
Okay, Micah, so monotheism is obviously very important in the Abrahamic beliefs. Is life predestined? Is it predestined? Because prophecies, by definition, mean that events are coming that are already been written into the historic, like the time frame, into time itself. So, is there really such a thing as free choice under a monotheistic God?
Yeah. It's a controversial question in Christian history. It's, people talk about it over and over across the last 2 millennia and come up with different conclusions. But the way that I read it, and I think the strongest position within the Christian faith is that there is such a thing as free will, and there is such a thing as free choice. And in fact, that's why God created us to use our free will to invent and create new things, right? So God has created children who grow up to do the same sorts of things that God does, which is to create new things never been seen before. And if we accept that idea, then we have to accept something like what we call free will, and that in fact we're being called to use it all time.
Thank you. John, is there such a thing as free will? How does that work in with Buddhism?
well, still, if I'm understanding monotheism, like what did you say?
So monotheistic religions, they have prophecies built into their books. So Daniel dreams something, and it says that there's an event going to happen, right? Which means that over the course of time, that event will things will have to play out, so that event will have to happen, which calls into question human free will. I'm wondering whether in your religion is that even a problem? Is there such a thing as free will?
Well, if I don't have a free will, I wouldn't be able to do learn other religions. As I said, like with Christianity and stuff as well, because my dad is Christian and my mom's Buddhist, and also like I'm the proof that both our different religions can coexist. So I said pretty sure with also going off by what previously said with Christianity, with the free wills and stuff, it's like they're driven by love thy neighbor and all the you have free will to, and also follow the goal, and also with Buddhism you trying to achieve you're doing good things by the people, and you're trying to have a good karma, and you're trying to have you're trying to achieve higher planes. So I don't think that you're being restricted to don't have a free will or something like that. I don't think so, but I think both religions have a free will of, as long as you're following the principle, the foundation of the rule, for your training your inner self, your true self, you're having going to ascend to the higher planes, and then I think we have free wills. If you're by the questions, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Lincoln Cannon, is there such a thing as free will in your religion?
In the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament, there's a well-known story about Jonah, the one who's swallowed by a large fish. The most interesting part of that story is that God tells Jonah to prophesy that Nineveh will be destroyed. And after the part with the fish, he goes to Nineveh and he tells them, hey, listen, Nineveh, you're going to be destroyed. God said so. And he goes up in the hills to eat popcorn. Well, Nineveh repents and isn't destroyed. And Jonah gets really mad and says, God, you made me look like a fool. And then the story goes from there. I think the gist, the important takeaway from this story is that prophecy is not fortune telling. Prophecy is forth-telling in the Hebrew and Christian traditions. Prophecy is intended to influence the recipients of the prophecy. If it's a positive prophecy, it's intended to influence our actions to make it happen, to realize it. If it's a negative prophecy, it's intended to influence us to avoid it and to make it not happen. Prophecy is forth-telling. So yes, I do think we have agency, and that prophecy is there to provoke us to make the best uses of our agency.
Thank you. So Blair, do you have free will? Is free will does it exist?
So, yeah, I was just going to say, without getting into a philosophical debate of whether or not free will exists, Mormonism does put a heavy emphasis on agency, which is a little bit different than free will. But with agency, we have the ability to create our own futures, whether that's something amazing and glorious or whether that's something to our own destruction. That's up to us to decide. We also, so the future isn't written in Mormonism. You're not predestined to actually go do anything that you don't have a choice about. You have a choice about whether or not you can go do those things. So the future is unwritten.
Okay, Ben, is there such a thing as free will?
Well, earlier today, I spoke to Dr. Jose Cordero, a great leader and someone I consider now to be a friend to the Futurist New Deal and certainly to transhumanists the world around. And we were talking a little bit, he has an idea which he describes as an energy singularity, which is, of course, a concept that relates to a literal energy. But he sometimes uses this phrasing to describe human capital in the broadest sense, to describe the kind of efforts that we all make, this critical mass that we can reach towards achieving techno-futurist outcomes and ultimately the best of life extension outcomes. And that is a choice that we can all make. That is a choice that our society is not making. We all do have free will, and we need to be exerting and exercising that free will to better ends, to more humane and clearer ends. And I think it's the agency itself is something that we share with all creatures, and we tend to want to make it something more complicated than it need be. But the ability to use technology and to plan our society in advance is something that sets us apart, and it's something that we can even in this 21st century framework set ourselves apart from our predecessors by being much better in this area.
Okay, so that's really good. So thanks, Ben. So how does your religion and/or belief impact the? Do you think that there should be more influence of your belief or on the laws of a country?
Yes. So I do believe that we need to have a firm barrier between the roles of church and state in any civil society. A failure to do so is sometimes a tendency historically to create some troubling institutions, and it's something that we have to be careful with, because there is sometimes among religious literalists a tendency to creep towards theocracy, and so it's something we want to try to resist in that, not because there's something wrong with that on its face, but because there are human costs and other costs to allowing something like that to happen. And there's the U.S. and other countries are examples of places where this has happened to some degree in the present and in the past, and it's something that we want to fix.
All right, Blair. So separation of church and state, and would you like to see more influence of your ideas in a culture?
The separation of church and state is very interesting in Mormonism, and specifically where I live in Utah. There's a very long, complicated history of how Mormons have influenced the government of Utah, everything from polygamy to modern day rules on alcohol and what you're allowed to sell and buy. So I think the separation of church and state is a good idea. Of course, I think my specific ideas and my interpretations of my religion should be incorporated, but not everyone in my religion shares my same interpretations and shares my same ideas. And what happens is when we have some kind of theocracy, we risk becoming tyrants and oppressors for the diversity of religions that exist. So it'd be easy if we all agreed on a single theocracy, and the reality is we don't. We don't agree. So I think it does need to be a separation of church and state, but at the same time, I would also say that division is maybe a little bit of a false division. There really is no way to separate one's religious beliefs from how one engages in the political sector as well. We can try to separate those things, and we should, but at the same time recognize it's a little bit of a false distinction. Our religious beliefs do creep into our government and our system. So it's tricky.
Thank you. Very good. Lincoln Cannon, separation of church and state, and would you like your religion to have more influence in the legislative process?
I'm a strong proponent of a decentralized secular government, a strong decentralized secular government, and I had likened that, the reason for that, to the value of a referee at a sporting event. The secular government is the referee. It's not the most important or most interesting part of the game, but without it, the people pull out knives and knife each other, and there's not an interesting game to watch. Creativity is stifled, and it turns out to be something gross. I think the same thing happens in the religious world. We have many beautiful, wonderful, inspiring religious ideas that are going to help with human flourishing, human thriving. But we also need the referee. We also need something that helps us all keep the rules, that decentralizes our power, that makes sure that we all have to play by the same, play the same game together and cooperate and work together at making something for humanity. And secular governance has been and continues to be probably the best way to do that. Could there be other things in the future? Could there be new forms of government that we're not aware of yet, enabled by new technologies? I suspect so. But for now, I think the best thing that we can do is ensure that we have strong, decentralized secular powers to keep religion playing nicely with each other.
Thank you, John. Separation of certain church and state, and would you like to see your religion have more influence in the legislative process?
Well, it's like it's really a controversial question because we are in 21st century where we have other people's beliefs, and we have for example, we got we got this full panel of Mormons and Christians, and if I go the Buddhist, and if there's some of the rules and texts being incorporated into the state, and then what if some of the rules that is contradict to what the Mormonisms, or what if they got where it's hey, hold on a second, that's not how we're taught and stuff. So it's pretty tricky situation. Also, it's for me, it's the religion and the state should not mix, as well as because if it falls into the wrong hand, it become really there's a difference between passionist and extremist, and if you trying to mix that religion and the state, it just we just have to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hand. We just have to with what Lincoln said, it's we gotta find someone that let's say a proxy, so we can play night fair with each other and stuff. So
all right, thank you. Micah, same question.
Yeah, so my religion was born 2,000 years ago under powerful, despotic, theocratic regime, and so baked into Christianity is this idea that maybe we should reject that, right? State should kind of keep to its job, and maybe it should let religion alone. And you see that all through the New Testament, is that they are affirming the existent good that the state can do, but rejecting the notion that it should dictate religious beliefs or religious adherence or religious worship, right? So that's really core. I think that's important. So separation of church and state is really important. What I think, though, is that you have to, anytime you're in society, you have to have some kind of values that are shaping the society is becoming. And so early Christians in the New Testament wrote that ultimately both they themselves own kind of new movement, and the Roman Empire were going to be judged by the same criteria, which is, does this lead to greater flourishing? Does this lead to greater life? Does it lead to increasing human potential? And so a lot of the images that we get in religious literature about the judgment that's coming says this is standard we all have to be judged by. Is this increasing and improving humanity, or is it taking us backwards? And the way Christians in the first century saw the Roman Empire was actually taking humanity backwards, and needed to stand against that. So I think that's how we need to think about our future. Is our government, is our state leading us forward? Is it blessing all life? Or doing something destructive, trying to impose one person's desire, one person's opinion on other people? And if it's doing that, then I think we reject that.
All right, thank you. So my next question is for Micah again, go the other way. Religious persecution. Religious persecution seems to be a big issue nowadays. Christians in the Middle East, or different groups around the world, are being harassed by either government or non-government forces. Should the globe stand up and defend these people? Defend whether it's secular governments or should religious vigilante groups be allowed to stand up for persecuted groups, or should we all just leave it to Mother Nature? Micah, take it away.
That's a powerful question. I think we need to pose religious persecution in all its forms. So if my Buddhist friends or Hindu friends or Muslim friends are being persecuted in some way, we need to stand up to that and resist it. And one reason why that's important is because religion that spreads by violence, persecution, is not good religion, right? That's not the kind of religion we want. And so I strongly oppose the persecution on religious grounds. I think any kind of good intentioned leadership in the world needs to stand up to that, to whatever ability they have. Obviously, in each situation, there's difficult questions that are pragmatic questions. In terms of taking a stand against religious persecution, I think should be unified up front.
All right, thank you, John. Standing up to religious persecution.
Well, still, are you saying we should bring back the Knight Templars? It's because it's it's like, well, as a religious, like, well, let's say, well, I grew up in like multi-religious and country. It's like, it's really, it's not fair to see that they're being prosecuted because of their belief and stuff. So I'm standing ground. It's like, if someone being like, let's say being bullied or like what they believe, I'll stand up for them. No matter, it's like, it's what they believe. You know what I mean? So like, I think we should like, we should do something about like other people being prosecuted because of their beliefs and stuff.
All right, cool. Lincoln Cannon, religious persecution. Is it everybody's responsibility?
While I'm a strong proponent of decentralized secular governance, I'm an equally strong proponent of religious freedom. And I think that religious persons should be free to practice their religions any way they want, as long as they're not oppressing people. Yes. And that's where the persecution problem, of course, arises. Once we get into the practices of oppressing others, we need to stand up and against that. And I support groups that defend themselves. If that's what their religion teaches them to do. I also support groups that want to sacrifice themselves, if that's what their religion teaches them to do. But in the end, I'm going to be on the side of those who want to defend them and defend all of our liberty to engage in our religions according to our conscious
Blair?
choices.
Sorry,
Sorry.
but could I add something? I quite agree with Licken said, because it's like if we're going to defend other people's belief, like we also have to be sure that those people are not oppressing other people to like using it as trying to oppressing them to join the religion, because like yes, you are free to practice what you believe, but you're not, it's not fair to oppressing other people because you don't believe in, like they don't believe in what you believe. So we also have to be careful of that, so as well. Yes.
All right, thank you for that extra input, John. Blair, religious persecution.
Yeah, Mormonism has an interesting history again with religious persecution. We actually had an exterminator, Freudian slip, an extermination order against Mormonism or Mormons. And so Mormons tend to have really strong ideas about religious freedom and not being oppressed and being told how we ought to practice our religion. At the same time, it's very tricky. I don't think we should pretend that religious persecution is the only type of persecution. So hypothetically, if your religion says I should throw teenage virgins into volcanoes as a sacrifice to my God, and a secular government says, no, sorry, you don't get to throw teenage virgins into volcanoes as part of your religious practice, it would be very easy for said religion to say, oh, I'm being persecuted. And so when we talk about this idea of religious freedom, yes, I am definitely for religious freedom and people being able to practice their religious freedom. But like in contemporary issues, like with the LGBTQ community, persecution is a two-way street. It's not just something that a religious person can cry out when they don't want to be nice to someone else, and vice versa.
Ben Zion, religious persecution. Should secular governments rally to defend religious groups?
Well, I would really tend to agree with Blair on this point, that the key concern here would be any human rights abuses perpetrated against anyone, people of faith, or others who are on the receiving end of that. And that's certainly been known to happen in nearly every iteration historically, and it's a thing that we have to resist. A person's, and not uncommon in the United States, in some religious, in some parts of the country and in some religious organizations for this kind of acting out on this sort of martyr complex, where every transactional matter becomes a cause for a rallying cry about themselves being persecuted. And that's something that we have to just kind of take that with a grain of salt, because the key concern is the functioning of the civil society. And Blair's example of throwing virgins into the volcano, there are things like this that enter into public policy matters, maybe not in such a severe way, where we just have to accept the ruling of the secular courts and organizations.
All right, thank you, Ben. So my next question for you, Ben, is should religion have an impact on social values, rules to do within society, on the family, on sexuality, and other social issues?
Well, this is maybe another area where I think there's a tendency for religious literalists to creep into an extremely socially conservative position. At times, that is to the detriment of society. If you get a group of ultra-Orthodox Jews together, a group of fundamentalist Christians together, and a group of fundamentalist Muslims together, and ask them about these issues, you might find that they have more in common with one another than they have with us, their cohorts on this panel. And that does tend to be the case. So we have to be aware that we want to always be striving to have a high functioning civil society, and one that allows for freedoms. And the best kind of freedoms are really, in my view, the kinds that are allowing people to live well, more over the kinds that relate to ideologies.
Blair, the influence on religion and social issues?
Yeah, that is definitely a really tricky one. I think the question isn't matter of should or shouldn't, because the reality is religions already do. Religions already have a huge influence over what are so-called secular political ideas about who can marry who and who gets to cohabitate with who and so on and so forth. So the question isn't should or shouldn't, it's already is. The bigger issue is how do we reconcile these different views? How do we come to any sort of agreement on how we can, again, not engage in human rights violations because we disagree with one another. So I'm definitely in favor of giving a wide berth of liberties that people can engage in different social issues, and at the same time just being very cautious as to not oppress and hurt one another. And that is the trick, reconciling that balance.
All right, thank you. So Lincoln Cannon, religion and social issues.
Unavoidable. It's not a question of should or shouldn't, as Blair pointed out. Religion is the most powerful social technology. It already has for millennia shaped human culture and values. It's continuing to do so. It will continue to do so going forward. So the question is, how are we going to engage in that? How are we going to try to influence the way that our religions and our neighbors' religions shape our cultural values? And that's the exchange of religious ideas. That's the proselyting. That's the service. That's the reaching out and loving. Or on the flip side, that's the terrorism and that's the persecution. And so religions are engaged and will be engaged in shaping social values. How can we, as transhumanists, as religious transhumanists, how can we encourage forms of religion that are true to life and to love and to the earth and to each other to make the world a stronger, better place and to provoke a strenuous interest in those things in each other? That's the question I think is most interesting, because one way or another, religion will press irreligion to the wall. So we need the best religion.
All right, thank you. John, religion and social values, the influence they have.
Yeah, the religion's been like with human history throughout the time, like the very start of time. It's already it's shaped our social, and it's already shaped our socials and social issues and stuff. And also as well as like, well, like we can't really escape it, but we are in 21st century now, and I think we need to like mature about it and say like, look, there are other beliefs, and also there are people like other people have different opinions and stuff, and so we need to look into that. And as well as like, we're not going to have another like a crusader war or something like that. Like it's really, so we need to have someone to say like, look, these are the term, you either agreed it or not, you know. It's like, so we should really look into that.
All right, thank you. Micah Redding, religion and social
Yeah.
values.
So I live in Nashville, Tennessee. We're kind of right in the Bible Belt, one of the most religious places in the United States. And so we deal with this all the time, right? So recently there was a move to illegitimize marriages that were performed by a secular officiant. So this is probably a move to kind of enforce social conservatism, right? To make it so that atheists and non religious people have a harder time officiate ceremonies that they see fit, right? So it has to go more through the church or something like that, or there's more pressure to go through a church. And so that's a really bad idea. It's a really problematic position for a government to pursue. And the reason why it happens is because in a place like this, there's kind of a background assumption that everybody Christian, like we're all religious, we're all the same sort of religion, and that's kind of an assumption that a lot of people work with. And so these ideas, these principles, these stands that we have within our own religious tradition should be applied to the rest of the society. And I think that's really deeply wrong, and it's ultimately inescapable in a way. But I think the way we deal with that is that we go back to the best version of religion possible. And I think one thing that for me, the core is the call of Abraham. So Abraham, the central character in the Jewish and the Christian and the Islamic worldview. And he's called the father of faith because he launched all these kind of religions. And the call of Abraham is to form a people who will bless all the other people, the people that are not them. And so what I want in any place, whether it's a majority Christian or a majority Muslim or a majority Judaism, I want a religion that is intended to trying to figure out how to bless the people who are outside of it, who are trying to bless the people who are not part of that religion, and instead of just trying to make the local area good for them. So that's what I call Christians to. That's what I would call Muslims to. That's what I would call Jewish people to.
All right, cool, Micah. So next question, because you're all involved in science in some way, form, some form. Religion and its voice into the scientific realm. Is it outsized? And if you could reform it, or does it need reforming? Would you? And all those sorts of ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So religion has had a big impact in the history of science. One of the particular things that we could look back at is Francis Bacon in the early 1600s wrote a religious argument to King James, who's the kind of the namesake of the King James Bible. He wrote a religious argument for why science should be pursued, why this was a religion and should be at the center of society. And his arguments similarly led to the foundation of the British Royal Society, which became this very leading scientific institution. So religion has had a huge impact in the history of science on the positive and motivation side, and also on the net, right? And everybody talks about the Galileo's arguments with the Catholic Church and so forth. In my own context, Dayton, Tennessee, not that far away from where I am. That's where the Scope monkey trial happened, where people were trying to prohibit the teaching of evolution in the schools, right? So that kind of controversy is kind of very present and in some ways pressing. So I think religion should absolutely motivate people to pursue scientific understanding, and I think it has historically in a lot of ways. Understand the universe better, to understand a lot of the way a lot of people talked about is to understand the way that the Creator thought about the world. I think it's important. And religion dictates what science should discover or what science say, then it's missing the boat. It's making a mistake.
All right, thank you for that, John. Your view on science's religion's voice into the scientific realm.
Well, we live in 21st century, and it's also to have we have religion and then we got science, and it's pretty. I think it's what I want to see is I really want to see religion and science being combined and working together. It's because it's when it comes down to the principle of it, I think they're pretty the same. So I think it's when two forces as a religion and science work together, I think we can achieve more, and we can achieve more. So I think we should work together. So.
All right, thank you, John. Lincoln Cannon, science and religion.
Science has and it can and should influence religion. It's been doing this for as long as humanity has been around. Science has changed, religion has co-evolved with it. Go back to the origins of Christianity. It wasn't much like it became a few hundred years later when it integrated with Neoplatonism, which was the science of its day. Go 1,000 years ahead in time from that, Aristotelian philosophy is rediscovered. Islam brings it back to Europe. And what do the Christians do? Well, they syncretize with Aristotelian philosophy, which was the science of its day. And you've got Thomas Aquinas writing Summa Theologica, which is this gigantic treatise, which is essentially integrating science and religion in his time. Fast forward another 1,000 years, and we've run into new forms of science. We've got Einstein, we've got Darwin, and it's presented new knowledge and new challenges. And what's religion doing? Well, some people naively think that that's going to kill religion, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is religion is continuing to evolve and continuing to syncretize and continuing to leverage what science teaches us. And I think that not only will it do that, it should do that. This is a good thing. Conversely, science or religion can motivate us and inspire us to engage in the scientific project. We have these visions, we can have these visions of the future, which move us to be participants in the human story, in the human plan, in God's plan for the future and for humanity. And one of the tools that we have in participating is knowledge. And what is science if not just a formalization of the process of collecting knowledge about the world, about presumably God's creation? So as we collect that knowledge, then we apply it through technology, we are then using what God has given us to its best potential. So we've got science that informs our religion, and then we've got religion that can inspire us in the scientific project. I think this is not only compatible, I think the two should be complementary.
Thank you, Lincoln. Blair, your ideas on science and religion.
I think of science and religion serving two different purposes, and it's not that those two different purposes can't play nice together, it's just that they serve different purposes. Science is the best tool we have at describing the world as we experience it and understanding the world as we experience. Science doesn't necessarily tell us what we ought to be doing with that newfound knowledge. That's where our philosophies and our religions and our theologies and our values come in. So science gives us the tools to say, oh, this is how you could create a vaccination. But science doesn't necessarily tell you you ought to be creating vaccinations. That's kind of where religion and philosophy comes in. So I see them as hopefully playing nicely together, but serving ultimately different purposes. And if as a transhumanist, I definitely think that we should have science leading the way in the evolution of religion, not the other way around.
Thank you very much. Ben, science and religion.
Yes. Earlier in this talk, I spoke of the need for a wall between church and state, but I do believe that that's something of a 20th century model in certain regards. All of us here are transhumanists. We believe in ideas like a more robust post-industrial society, something akin to a post-scarcity, ultimately. And in that framework, without the competition for scarce resources in the same way, we might, and also with advanced algorithms that are capable of organizing new kinds of institutions that the world has not seen, we might have the possibility for a very peaceful and stable religious state, or a religious state substrate, something that's a subset of the larger civilization. But there's certainly a lot of options on the table moving forward as advanced algorithms and automation kind of allow for that. But I would tend to agree with the other panelists. I think that scientism is not fully realized as a human undertaking, and neither is spirituality. And we can advance both of those things together. They're not diametrically opposed. And we can encourage those values. And I feel particularly that the scientific method and values around that are of great importance to us.
All right. So my next question is, what happens in your belief after you die, and how does it impact people who aren't in your faith? And is that is that moral? Ben Zion, take it away.
Yes. I mean, in talking about afterlife concepts with transhumanists, you'll get a pretty broad diversity of different ideas, including some that are kind of based on ideas of predictive algorithms. There is a prospect for advanced algorithms becoming such that we are able to that an artificial singleton is able to kind of retroactively reward us for having advanced its existence. And to me, this is an afterlife concept that is a little bit strange and terrifying, but also one that I think is of great interest. And a lot of related simulation theory notions are of great interest. To me, the main thing is that we want to bring life extension and ultimately implementations well beyond that to all of these communities without upsetting them and without causing infighting. As far as the great beyond, I'll leave that to others to articulate more fully.
Blair, what happens after you die? And for believers and non-believers, I know there's a bit of a difference. And is it moral?
Well, first of all, I have no idea what happens after I die. If I did, I would tell you. But in Mormon theology, there's a lot of stories and narratives about what happens after you die. And basically, there's elevation of degrees of glory and things you can achieve. Whether this happens after you die, or maybe you don't have to die to achieve that kind of glory, that's up for debate. As far as I'm concerned about an afterlife for me, this is actually one of my transhumanist heresies. I'm not particularly interested in living forever uploaded to a machine or some other type of substrate. If I'm going to live forever, the substrate's got to be an upgrade from what I got going on right here. And so if it's not an upgrade from the body I have right now, I don't want it.
All right, thank you. Lincoln Cannon, what happens after you die as a believer and for non-believers, and is that moral?
Sure. So in Mormon theology, according to our scripture, everyone will be resurrected to immortality who wants to be. Everyone. It's nearly universal. And then, as the story goes, the persons who have been resurrected to immortality will go to innumerable heavens or forms of glory, and they will be as diverse as the stars, the scriptures say. Mormons, of course, have their preferred one, and they have their rules for getting into that, but they also recognize that the rules for getting into their preferred heaven are in accordance with their desires and values, and will differ from the desires and values of people who want to go to the other glories and heavens that are available. So again, from a theological perspective, Mormonism is essentially a universalist religion. And I say essentially universalist because it does have an out for people who don't want to be resurrected, which I think is a moral thing. So is all of this moral? Well, I don't think it could be more moral. If people are going to glories and heavens in accordance with their desires, and there's a way to work that all out, how could it possibly be more moral? One other thing that I'll add is that in the Mormon theological tradition, to go to heaven, you don't have to die. And in fact, when people are resurrected, they're resurrected bodily in the Mormon interpretation of Christianity. So there are also people who will be transfigured, according to the prophecies, and those transfigured persons will attain immortality without ever dying. So it will be the dead raised to immortality, the living transfigured to immortality, and we all together will then live in a diversity of glorious heavens in accordance with our desires.
All right, thank you. John, your ideas. What's going to happen after you die as a believer, and what happens to the rest of us, and is it moral?
So it's like we as a human, we live through life. We have a journey. We live through time. With the journey, we have a beginning and the end. So, and also with a journey, we have different journeys. So being able to, like, after, with my belief, it's like after we die, we have what's it called? We have like reincarnation. It depends on the journey that you took. It's either you did good, or bad. It's like if you did good, you probably reincarnated into like a good thing, probably like for example a human. Or if you did a bad thing, you probably come back as like a rat or something like that. So being, for example, it's like with tying into transhumanism and stuff, it's like what Blair say, it's like being your conscious being uploaded to someone, like to the cloud or whatever. It's like being, for example, like I want to live long, but I don't want to live forever, because it's like, you know, for me, it's like I want to try new things. For example, it's like you're born, you live, that's your journey, and then you die, and then you move on to the next journey as life. So yeah, I'll probably move on to like I wouldn't want to be like live forever or something like that. So, but yeah.
All right, thank you, Micah. What happens after you die, according to you, and as a believer? What happens to the rest of us, and is that moral?
Yeah, so in my religion, afterlife is in this universe, and so this is there's debate about this within the Christian tradition, but that's the earliest, oldest, and strongest belief is that that we would be resurrected back into this universe. And the reason for that is because the Judeo-Christian tradition is very interested in us being invested in the future. So the early in the Hebrewish and scriptures, this idea that essentially you've gone through your children. Your children are the way you attain an immortality in the land because you create an impact that goes on and on and on after you're gone. And what develops later in the tradition is this idea that well to be truly invested in the future, you have to know that the future that lies in front of you is the same future you're working on now, which is that if you die in the process of grow a vineyard or grow orchard or something like that, that you could have the possibility of being resurrected back from the dead so that you could eat from the fruit of the orchard planted. Right, that you could reap the benefits of the work that you're doing now, and that creates. If you believe that, if you believe the things I'm doing now are going to continue to play on into the future, and that if I die, I'll be able to come back and participate in whatever bit or blessing I've created. That makes people very invested in the future, and I think that's the Christian vision. So the whole idea of judge, the whole idea of being judged by your works. It's not just that God comes in from kind of outside of the picture and says, hey, you did this thing that I don't like, or you did this thing that I do like. It's actually that you get to the results of the thing you do. Right? If you burn down a forest, you're going to come back into a world where you had burned down a forest, right? And people are going to be mad about that, and you're going to be able to experience the detrimental effects that you caused. But if you sacrifice for the greater good, you're going to be able to come back into a world in which people are happy that you are there because they know you're a person, they know you're a person that that looks out for greater good. You're going to be able to participate in those benefits. So if you're a believer or a non-believer, I think the way I read the scriptures, you come back into the world you helped create. If you did good, powerfully positive things in the world, you'll get to experience those benefits. If you did terrible and negative things in the world, you'll experience what you call. And I think that's close to moral or just as we can get.
All right, thank you very much, Lincoln Cannon. All right, so my next question, it's along the lines of Ernst Becker, okay? Because I'm pretty sure most of you will be familiar with Ernst Becker, and he writes that basically society is perpetuated because of something called death denial, and basically it's that you don't want to think about death because it's yucky, and it's yucky, so we invent these sort of memes, these fetishes, what he calls fetishes, which is the religions, and they pop up and they divide and they have a story and a base and then they breed out, and it's death denial. And so society is pushed along because people don't want to think about their own mortality, so they build society, they build architecture, they build stuff to make themselves feel important. Do you think that death denial is a big premise for why you are both interested in transhumanism and your religion? Are you doubling? Are you trying to expand your bets, so to speak? Are you trying to double your bets, like death denial and transhumanism? Ernst Becker, Micah, please go.
Absolutely. So Ernst is, I think, absolutely right about the way that the human mind and human societies work, which is that we're all conscious beings, which means that we know that we can die. We know we're limited, we're finite. We know that we have an expiration date as it stands. Probably no other animal knows that the way we do. It drives us into insane behavior patterns. And So I think analysis is largely correct. What he maybe misses or leaves out is the fact that many of the people do can be positive things, right? They contribute to the world around them. They can contribute charities. They can contribute foundations that do good long after they're gone. That's a way of dealing with that death anxiety. So I don't think it's an entirely negative or negative force the way he portrays it. Personally, I'm not terribly concerned about my own personal death. That's not. It used to be greater fear for me when I was a teenager. It's not as much anymore for whatever reason. But I think if I look at the fact that I'm trying to create impact in the world, Becker would say that's a form of death anxiety, right? I'm trying to address the need to do something lasts beyond where I am, and as long as that leads to productive and healthy outcomes, then I'm for it.
All right, thank you. All right, so John, do you understand that question? Are you familiar with Ernst Becker?
I'm gonna say no. I don't know who that is. I apologize for that.
That's okay. So basically, what happens is as humans, we're conscious of our own death, right? So we can actually conceptualize it and think about it. And in the meantime, we make ourselves purposely busy. We write books, we sing songs or do music and build buildings, and we do all the things that are in society, do science and stuff, and we keep ourselves busy, have families or whatever, and it's a form of death denial because we don't want to concentrate and think about our own demise. Do you see this as a significant factor in your religion?
Well, it's like you said, the day that we're born, we have it's like the day that we're born, we're decaying, we're dying. But it's like with what you said at the very start of the video, what is the meaning of life? It's like it's what we do with our life that matters. It's like it's trying to do what you do in our life, the significant things, and then we just trying to find our true self within this life. And then it's like, for me, the idea of death doesn't really matter, because it's like what you do now in this right moment is matters. And then it's like death as also is a beginning of the new journey. So for me, I'll say that while you're living, do as much as you can, and then live in the moment, and then this is your journey, have fun.
All right, thanks, John. Who's next? Lincoln Cannon. You understand the question?
Yeah, so why does he care if people don't like death? Maybe he's too much in favor of it. Anyway, I'll double down on it. I'll say I'm not only a death denier. I'm an anti-death warrior. Let's destroy it. I'm in favor of what the Bible has to say. The Bible says that death will be vanquished. I'm in favor of what the Book of Mormon says about death. The Book of Mormon calls death an awful monster. So let's kill that awful monster. Let's combine our forces and fight against it, and let's win, and let's live as long as we want to. Some people don't want to live forever. That's fine. Let them live as long as they want to. Maybe they'll want to live another day every day, and that'll turn into forever. I don't know. What does forever even mean? But let's kill death. Let's do that. What's wrong with that? Let's not only deny it, let's fight it. And now somebody might think, well, does that mean that, we're not grown-ups here? We're not accepting the reality of death and the fleetingness of the moment? No, I'm losing something every moment. Change is constant. It's pervasive. It's persistent. This moment in time and space will never exist again, ever. And it has real value right now. So I should love it. I should embrace it. I should enjoy it. I should make the most of it, and not just, run around trying to kill the future death. Let's kill the present death too, by making every moment as valuable as possible. But we do that best, I think, most holistically when we think about the confluence of the past, the present, and the future, and what we can learn from the past, prepare for the future while we're living as best we can right now.
Do you go up on stage and do motivational speeches?
If you need me to.
You should consider that as a career, by the way. Okay, so Blair, Ernst Becker, death denial.
Yeah, so as you'll notice from Lincoln's passionate exclamation, transhumanists have a very interesting relationship with death denial. In one way, transhumanists embrace death in ways that the majority of other religions don't. The way other religions tend to grapple with their own mortality is to displace responsibility onto some other non-human deity or whatever it is, to be like, you're going to come take care of this big death problem for me. That's how I'm going to deny death. Transhumanists, on the other hand, embrace that, but to the point reject it with such fervor. So the example being the average transhumanist would probably say, oh, death is a real thing, and it's such a real thing, and I embrace death so much that I'm going to completely reject it. And it's not going to be an external force that rejects it. It's an internal force that happens within humanity. So, I mean, I definitely share Lincoln's fervor that we should definitely get rid of death, because the way I see it, death is the biggest oppressor of all. And I do a lot of work in activism, and it's about dismantling systems of oppression. And you think it might be government, you think it might be religious, you think it might be all these different things, but at the end of the day, the biggest oppressor of all is death. That takes away my agency in ways no other thing does. So yeah, I want to get rid of death.
All right, Ben Zion, Ernst Becker, this is big in your area. Death denial.
Sure, yeah. Every creature has death awareness. Humans have a little bit of more of ability in predictive areas, but I think that this death awareness is something that drives us to areas of imagination. And I agree with what Micah said, that is not uniformly a bad thing. That is an organizing principle that motivates us to create institutions to address these problems. And this is a relatively new thing. This SENS approach, in the post-CRISPR era, the idea of ending cell death and similar interventions towards longer lifespans became dramatically more viable as a concept. And so I agree also with what Lincoln said, that we are moving into a time where we can be taking that stand, and should be taking that stand towards ending the demise of the human species. And the idea that we are in denial as transhumanists is one that you will hear from a lot of people outside of this community. And you just have to say that the proof is in the pudding. Let's see what George Church says in another 10 years. Let's see what Aubrey de Grey says in another 10 years. Let's see where we are when we have these interventions incorporated with public health services and so forth. If we do have life extension on the horizon.
Thank you for that, Ben. So my next question, as we wrap up in the last half hour of this show, is there's a changing world on the horizon. For example, the Christians have been rocked by this changing world because suddenly you've got a whole bunch of adherents, say, in China, and a lot of fundamentalist Christians feel like there's a decline of Christianity in the United States, and Europe is being changed because a lot of people feel like it might become Eurasia. So there's a mixture of Islam and Christianity there, which wasn't before because historically it's been Christian Europe. So my next question is, religion, it's a changing landscape, a changing global landscape. What do you see personally from your perspective as a changing global landscape? And it'll be interesting with the Mormons because it's it's the quickest growing religion. John's is the oldest established religion with a huge population. And Ben, yours is an emerging idea, and I think it's quickly growing. So I'm very interested to see from your perspective of where you are, this changing global landscape.
Yes. Well, I think there's a less of a prospect for a tribalist and ethno-nationalist anxiety around these set of concerns in a worldview where that has universalism and the good of everyone at its core, as I believe transhumanism, for the most part, really does. And but these kinds of concerns, and they're not only driven by bad feelings, they're also driven by just the very natural problems that derive from scarcity and economic concerns. It's very hard to predict which of these concerns will escalate and diminish. But we must say that overall, these concerns are diminishing. The world is a much more peaceful place than it was, despite what the news cycle might have you believe. If you're someone who is a news junkie, that's an outsized impression that you might be getting from the mainstream media as to the troubles in the world. Because if you look at fatality statistics from violence, if you look at fatality statistics from hunger or not having potable water, if you look at other concerns of this kind, we are moving into a far more developed world. Those just in the networked era, those deaths from not having potable water or malnourishment have gone down 75%. And they're continuing to go down. We're moving in the right direction. So I don't see these concerns just in the way that I see certain kind of differences in political philosophy and economic theory becoming more academic in a post-scarcity world. I see some of these tensions becoming more philosophical as well.
Thank you for that, Ben. Okay, Blair, so on a changing global landscape, what do you see from your perspective?
Well, so it's interesting about where the future of religion is going and what that's going to look like. I'm guilty. I'm a millennial. And so my generation is definitely becoming disenchanted with established religious institutions. And if you look at the stats, it's not necessarily that they're becoming disillusioned with narrative or the importance of spirituality or even deity, but it's the idea of our religious institutions are failing in some way. And I think that big failing is the failure to act. And religions do act. They do a lot of things. There's a lot of important ritual, but religion also has built into it a little bit of I would say a really slow self-correcting mechanism. If the ritual isn't working anymore, it eventually gets discarded and a new one gets replaced. The religion keeps moving along, but the rituals tend to change. And I think millennials, more than any other generation right now, are pushing religions to evolve into a place of action. Millennials, again, if you read the stats, it's more a disillusionment of why are you spending money on these fancy architectural structures when we have impoverished people at our borders? Why aren't we being provoked to action in very transhumanist ways? Why aren't we healing the sick? Why aren't we doing these things? If our rituals aren't giving us the results that we need to adapt our rituals. And so I see the landscape of religion as a whole, as the younger generations continue to rise, they're not going to put up with it. They're going to say, you need to act, or you need to get out of the way because we need to do something about this.
All right, thank you. Lincoln Cannon, your thoughts on a changing global landscape of religion?
I hate to interrupt you for a second, Lincoln, but I may have to drop out of this call in a few moments. I have to get on the road soon to our Burbank longevity seminar.
No problem.
I apologize, Lincoln. Please continue.
No problem, Ben. It's been good talking with you. I think Blair's given a good account of some of the cultural happenings in the United States in particular, and perhaps to some extent what's going on in Europe. If we look at the global landscape, there are some important trends that some people seem not to be aware of. And number one, Islam is the fastest growing large religion right now. It's growing faster than Christianity. Christianity is probably the second fastest growing large religion right now, and irreligiosity has already peaked. Right now, per capita, humans are becoming more religious worldwide. Now, we might live in some places where it feels like non-religious persons are increasing in numbers, but that's because we're living in narrow pockets, perhaps, on the east and west coast of the United States or in some places in Europe. But if you look at the rest of the world, religion is growing and thriving, and we've passed peak non-religiosity. So what are we going to do about that? That's a huge, important question because the world is becoming more traditionally religious right now. And so one of the values that I would propose to you of religious transhumanism, particularly of religious transhumanism as represented by the people in this panel, is that we are helping people understand how traditional religion is compatible with science and emerging technology, and how it's compatible with a thriving human future. We are the voices that are going to be able to reach growing, thriving numbers of human beings that come from and are going to these traditions. And if transhumanists care about influencing the world to embrace transhumanism, they should be solidly in our corner as we, as religious transhumanists, go and try to share the message of transhumanism in ways that are consistent with, compatible with, and complementary to traditional religions.
Thank you for that. John, a changing global landscape.
Well, as you say, like we have a lot of like religions coming in, people coming in, like European, Euro-Asians and stuff. One, we have to like say that there are a lot of people with different opinion and different ideologies are coming in, and we also have to say that yes, you have to like a freedom or your practice and stuff, as well as like you got to look at yourself that your views are also not being like trampled or like being contradicted and stuff, as well as with the new people coming in with the new ideologies and stuff. We also have to respect them, and we also have to like say step in, like be like go in and say step in and say, look, what you're doing is like not in the way of like kind of like a humanism and stuff as well. So like we previously mentioned the say like or like sacrificing 72 virgins and volcanoes and stuff. We like with we being living in 21st century, we gotta step up and say, look, I know this is your religion, but this is like this is wrong and stuff. We gotta be like be strong and like be opinionated about it and stuff. So also because of the new ideologies coming in, like we gotta like stand back and say you're not oppressing other people as well. So yes, this is your religion, and like if people are interested, they will come to you. If not, they will just like, you can't force other people to like bring it into your side. That's if you're forcing other people, then you become like extremist rather than you're passionist. So with the new people, with the rise of the new people, we gotta draw a fine line between a passionist and an extremist. So
Thank you for that. Micah Redding on the changing global landscape.
As Lincoln said, religiosity worldwide is not going away. It's not going down. It's probably increasing, rapidly. But a part of that is that some traditional forms of religion are falling up or failing in some important ways, and Blair kind of touched on some of those. So what happens when a traditional religion stops working is that people don't necessarily become less religious, become religious in a really dangerous and erratic way. White nationalism is one of the examples, and that has been not that far from my location here. You can see the eruptions of these kinds of really perverse kinds of religious expression. And I think they are really coming from the failure of traditional religion to speak to where people are and the kind of concerns they have and the questions they're asking. So if we don't help our religions kind of continue to evolve and grow into the future, then we will see dangerous religions emerge. And that is much more concern to me than the fact that people in some areas might be becoming less religious or converting to a different religion. And I'm very much concerned if they're losing faith in a traditional religion and adopting some kind of dangerous ideology that can lead to violence or destruction of our society.
All right, so that's taking us close to the end of the show. So what I wanted to ask you to do is to just speak on anything you want, the future of religion, your beliefs, plug anything you have to plug, just a kind of a wrap-up, final comments, all that sort of stuff. And anything you want to talk about, I just I'll just give you some time. But yeah, starting with you, Micah. Thank you so much for coming on Detonation. It's been really good. And answer any questions that I haven't asked. Because there's so much in the religious world. It's hard to cover everything. But I just tried to do it in a very general way so you could get as much out as you wanted. So, Micah, thank you very much for coming on Detonation. You have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been awesome to be here and to talk with all of you. I'll say, there are billions of religious people in the world. There are billions of Christians. There are billions of Muslims. There are at least a billion Hindus, and there's a mixture of other things. Their religion is very important in shaping society. It's been important to who we are, and it's going to continue to be in the future. So I think it's really important for secular or non-religious to understand that religion is not going away. Religion has done many terrible things, but it can also do many powerfully good things, and that you should be working together with people of faith to help create the best future that we possibly can. So in the plugging something coming October 19th, Nashville, Tennessee, we've got a second annual Christian Transhumanist Conference, and that is what we try to do. We try to bring together secular, non-religious, atheist voices with religious people of kind of all across the spectrum, so that we can have these conversations and challenge each other, and inspire each other to become better, and to help each other to work together for a better future. I think that's our ultimate aim, and we should all be doing everything we can to make that happen.
And I've seen your interviews with Aubrey de Grey, and I've seen and I know about your institution. And as soon as we get the internet cleaned up, I'd love to have a one-on-one with you, proper interview, and get more into that, because that to me is absolutely fascinating. And hopefully, that can you're really starting. It could be really the start of the genesis of something very special and very new on the spectrum that we haven't seen in religion before. So thank you very much for coming on Detonation, John.
Absolutely.
Final comments.
Well, I'll say thank you for having me. My message for today, for the last show, is just respect each other, be nice to each other, and be opinionated, and have an open mind. And we live in 21st century, and there's nothing I don't like more than someone shoving down their ideas, their views, forcefully down my throat. But it just be nice, and be it doesn't matter what their view is. It's religious or being whatever, your social views, whatever. It just, if you my message is, if you're interested, just go and ask. And also, as well as people who are preaching and stuff, don't go and say look, this is what it is, you must come join us. Just don't force them. Just, if people are interested, they will come to you, they'll ask you. And we live in 21st century, just be mature about it. And just make sure that you're not stepping the line over. There's a line between passionist and extremist. Just make sure that you're not stepping over it. So that's my my message for today.
And everybody watch John most Sundays on Detonation. He does an art show. He's really cool. We do an art show together. So thanks for coming on the special Saturday edition, John. Your voice has been really important here, and especially giving a little bit of diversity outside of the Mormonist theme that we have. So Lincoln Cannon. Same to you. I'd love to interview you off as an individual as well, but you have the floor, sir. Thank you so much for coming on.
Steele, thank you. I'd be happy to accept your invitation. It would be a lot of fun. My thanks also to Ben for setting this up, and thank you to the other panelists. I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. I guess my closing message will be that the best applications of intelligence and superintelligence that I can think of are creativity and compassion, so may it be. And I'll give the floor to our next panelist.
That's profound. And Blair, I've only just met you. I don't know too much about you, but so it's been a lot of fun to meet you and to learn about your perspective and things like that. And again, the floor is open to you if you would like to come on and we could talk about Christian Mormonism. Again, it's something new on the spectrum, and that's really different, And my theory around is similar with Lincoln's. I think we're heading into a more religious world. A lot of Christians, and there's a lot of sort of language out there about the decline of religion. But I'm actually looking at the birth rates, and it's mostly religious folk who are passing on religious ideas and they're having all the children. So I think we are heading into a more religious world, and people and things like like Mike's organization and what you guys are doing. I mean, maybe this could help to steer that new religious world in a slightly different direction. So thank you for your work and effort, and thanks for coming on Detonation.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I would definitely agree with the commentary that religion isn't going anywhere. It's here to stay. And I think part of the disillusionment with certain institutions is just part of the product of the evolution of religion. It continues to evolve and change. And I feel like religious transhumanism is particularly primed to assist in that evolution in productive ways, in engaging ways. If I could leave with a parting idea, it would be to incorporate more transhumanist ideas into your existing tradition. You don't necessarily have to give up the existing tradition to be able to incorporate transhumanist ideas and having a more practical take in your faith. So I was really happy to be here. Thanks so much to the other panelists. I had a really great time.
Yeah, thanks to all the panelists, and like Lincoln said, everybody, we all agree that Ben Zion has done an amazing job. It's all part of his campaign to become the nominee of the USTP. And good luck to him. I mean, he's been doing a lot of wonderful work. He's up against some stiff competition in that. And if you know anything about Detonation, we're following that campaign really, really closely, because that's something that could really, really rock the world if it goes the right way. So we're early on that. We will eventually get swamped by mainstream media, and it'll be like this forgotten relic of the past. But it's fun while it's happening. So so we get to have these good debates like this, and I'm sure we could come back with all of you people at some other point, do this or a completely different topic. The possibilities are always endless, and I hope that we have free will. I'm a believer in free will. I think that there is free will. I don't know if it's predestined. At least if I think it's predestined, at least if I think I'm having free will, I like that thought anyway. So so I'm going to pretend at least that there's free will and that anything could happen. So so for me so we could be here again doing this at some other point. So thank you everybody, and thanks to all the people joining us, watching Detonation. All more coming all this week. It's been a great show. I've had a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. And keep watching Detonation, because you're not going to get this sort of stuff anywhere else. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you.